115 South 15th Street in the second bedroom of Aunt Dora's house in Gadsden, Alabama. We talk about civil rights. I want you to understand why civil rights. I grew up in a segregated society. Sundays we had a blue law. Nothing was open on Sundays after 8 o'clock. Nothing at all. We started, we talked about Rosa Parks in 1957.
My bad. I thought it was.
But there were numerous people who got arrested. Not only in Montgomery, Gadsden, Birmingham. In fact, we called Birmingham because of so many bombs. But in 1955, we had a young preacher came to the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. My pastor, the late Reverend E.W. Jarrett of Gadsden, was from Montgomery. As a young man, I traveled with him during the summer, singing songs while he had revival. And at 12 years old, I was with my pastor as he had revival at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And on the Friday in 1956, I met this young pastor. And most times, you know, the older people disregarded young people, because this young pastor was only 26 years old. And his name, they called him ML at the time, Dr. Martin Luther King later. But as the movement started, the Montgomery bus boycott, Rosa was arrested, and the community decided that they would have one day boycott. Why was this? At the time, we could not walk on the same sidewalk as white person. If they came, we had to get off. Today, you can walk in any shoe store and buy a pair of shoes. We couldn't go in a shoe store. If we did, you would have had to draw a picture of your feet on a piece of paper, and you gave it to the person in the shoe store, and if they had your size, they would bring it out to you.
Did you have to see it?
But we had Spiegel catalog. We had Sears catalog. The reason you're seeing the brothers and people in overalls, because there was not places in town we could hustle. We could buy overalls. But unless you could order it from Spiegel or order it from Sears, you couldn't buy it. If you had the money, most time you couldn't buy a new car. And we talked about the restaurants. Sometimes people talk about the fact that we had segregated restaurants, segregated movies, segregated gas stations. Most of the time you would see signs that would tell you, read, nigga, run. And if you can't read, run anyway. Or no niggers or Jews allowed. That's just the way it was. Because of the Depression, most black people did not, and we didn't call each other black people, we were either colored or Negroes. But the white man said that there was a place for us. We were out of our place. And because of the humiliation and our elderly being disrespected, what really made the movement go in Alabama was our elderly. when you had 60 and 70-year-old men and women chose to walk 5, 6, and 7 miles to work than to ride those buses. To get up 4 and 5 hours earlier to get there on time, and then to walk back. I heard one say, my feet are tired. I'm worn out. But my soul is free. And that's what it was about. My soul was being released, was being free, because I'm tired of being a second-class citizen. See, America had a promise that all men were created equal. And that's why we started the civil rights movement. Civil rights. The right to be treated civilly as any other citizen. And somebody's not listening to me, I hear them talking. Because you might learn something. Because before you can know where you're going, you need to know where you came from. I was fortunate as a little boy, 5, 6 years old, listened to my great aunt, who was a slave. She was in her 90s. She had a memory like a hawk. We have overcome so much. And our movement was to see to it that the generations after us would not have to endure what we endured. It's amazing today that we have people who drop out of school when you had people that was killed just for knowing how to read. There were times in this country it was a hanging offense to know how to read. That was the reason in the church we had the old song. The leader would say them and the others would follow, because they did not want the white people to know that there was any of us that knew how to read. Okay? And we believed. We marked X's because it was wrong for us to know how to write. It was a death sentence. And now we have public schools. I had to buy my books. There were no free books. I had to buy those books. And if you didn't have the money, you had no books to go to school. There were no buses for us. Daughter, where's my daughter? Okay. My sister and I walked 5 miles from the 2nd grade to the 4th grade, each way to get to school. We had to walk through a white neighborhood. And rocks was thrown at us practically every day, just for walking through the neighborhood. I had a classmate that was 8 years old when people with sick dogs on him. He ran through the yard of a white person. He got tangled up on a line where the lady had her wash out, and he got tangled up in her dress. Nobody was home, but the neighbors called the police. He got 12 years for attempted rape. How was that attempted? because he was on that lady's property and he was hung up in her dress, so his mind was wrong. We went through these difficulties. We went through these situations. My job during the civil rights movement in Montgomery was that of a gas boy. I wonder what a gas boy is, because the black gas stations that they had, the oil companies no longer would bring gas to those stations, and the white stations would not sell us gas. So we had cars that would help people that would get, because of the bus boycott, would get to their various locations. So from all over other parts of Alabama, we would hide gallon cans of gasoline in the trunk of various cars to come and keep those cars supplied in order for them to move the people. And oftentimes, those cars would stop or harass. The police would stop us. Sometimes hold us 4 to 5 hours. Can you imagine in the Alabama heat where it's 80 and 90 degrees, you're sitting in a car for 4 to 5 hours, not allowed to let the windows down or anything else. And you had to sit there. It didn't matter if you needed to use the bathroom or anything else. That's the way it is. And that was the reason that we fought hard, and we wanted to be able to elect officials. That's why we wanted the right to vote. But they didn't want us to have the right to vote. We had to take an exam. And the exams were supposed to have been a civic exam to see if you knew about the country. But being in the South, a lot of those exams had questions in it as how many bubbles is in a bar of Irish soap? How many grunts is in a hall? No college professor would know that. So you could never pass the exam. And since you could not pass the exam, you couldn't register to vote. There were more than 700 people died fighting for the right to vote. And during that time, you had to be 21 years old in order to register to vote. It was only in the 70s that they dropped the age to 18, and that was after the Vietnam War, because if you were able to go to war, you should be able to vote. But today, I hear people who are eligible to vote tell me I'm not voting. I have nothing to vote for. You have everything in life is political. The air you breathe, the toilet that you flush, the water you drink, the car you drive. We went through a process so that you could have these jobs that you have today. There were no bus drivers or police officers or firemen. Black teachers could only work at a black school, and most of the time in Alabama, the schools that my grandmother and my parents went to did not go past the 6th grade. There was colleges that we could not go to unless it was the predominantly black college. You could not go to a regular college even though it was taxpayers paid for. none of us could go into a city library, not to check out a book. There was only certain taxi cabs you could ride in. These were things that we needed to overcome. And that's where the song, "We Shall Overcome," came from. That through it all, we will overcome all of that. And we would truly become an American citizen, entitled to a certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's what Dr. King was about, a drum major for justice. And it's not about just us. It was all of us. White men and black men, Jews and Gentiles. Dr. King said in this last message, like you, I would like to live a long life. I would like to live a life of longevity. But I can't worry about that now. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And to everything there's a season. And there was the timing in the 50s and the 60s in order to address the issue for America. Because as black men, and most of the men in Vietnam at that time looked just like me, were fighting and dying for freedom in another country for something that we did not have in our own hometown. Negroes played a substantial part in American history. If Negroes did not play their part, there would not be an America today. At the height of the Civil War, when President Lincoln first placed the Emancipation Proclamation, he did not allow slaves to become members of the military. It was only afterwards that the whites who had a 2-year tenure was about time, the time was up and the war was going bad, that he decided to allow slaves to become members of the Union Army. And when he did so, 265,000 slaves joined the Union Army. And they had an agenda. I'm going to free my people. And as my aunt said, the second part was, I'm going to get a chance to do that slave master what he's been doing to me all along. And that was the reason that the Union Army won the Civil War. Had it not been for those slaves, we would not have won that war, and there would not have been a United States of America. Most times we don't understand that, and we don't have that knowledge. We don't understand. This is why they did not want Negro history. They only wanted his story. I can only share with you, and I'm happy that the bishop allowed me to share with you my experience. This is what I lived. This is what I went through as a young man and what I participated in as we marched from Selma to Montgomery. We talked about the Klan and oftentimes we would talk about the Ku Klux Klan. But what you didn't know is that a lot of those same people that wore badges during the day wore sheets at night. Those firemen. And then we had people who looked just like you and I, didn't want things to change. Really. Because they had a certain position or held a particular office, or was looked up to, supposedly they thought so by the white woman. They did not want things to change. But America is something else. Prior to 1960, you may not know this, but the majority of black people, Negroes in America, was Republicans.
So there was not sure.
My king was a Republican. His daddy was a Republican. My parents were Republicans. My grandmother was a Republican. Why was that? Because after slavery, the Republican Party was headed by Abraham Lincoln, tried to make changes for Negroes and ex-slaves. It was the Democrats who kept us out of office and started segregation. It was the Democrats who created the Jim Crow laws. It was the Democrats. But see, the word of God to that whose own shall rise. So in 1961, following President Kennedy and Vice President Johnson, most blacks by 1964 in the South, they changed to the Democratic Party. But all I'm saying to you, if you look at and believe in the word, the party that held us or wanted to hold us in slavery is now headed by a black man. The party who wanted to deny us civil rights is now pushing civil rights. That is the difference, you know. And we should glory to his name because we've come a long way. While our parents and my generation was sitting there saying, how long? Not long. How long? Not long. I was surprised because I never thought that I would see the day that we would have a black president. But as a black man who marched in Selma, and marched in Birmingham, and Albany, Georgia, and Jackson, Mississippi, and who was cowed up in cow pens in Mississippi, to see Barack Obama being sworn in as president, it made it all worth it. That's why I said before, I'll be a slave. I'll be buried in my grave. And then said to you, we will not just tolerate or accept a second-class citizenship. We can make a difference. We did make a difference, and you need to take it forward now because it's your time to make a difference. The sacrifices that we made was not just for you, for those who are coming behind you. It's now time for you to take their place, to look for your children and your grandchildren, as we did. I told one of mine if they didn't vote, they would go on disability because I'm going to break something. I gave them a choice when it came to being the father of 9. I got 7 that have degrees. One have doctorate all the way down. I tell them I couldn't get mine, but you're going to get yours. You have a choice to go to college or go on disability. Because if you can't walk and have great talk, the government is going to take care of it. But if you can walk and talk, you're going to get something in your head because no matter what you get, that our mind is on things. We worry about cars and houses and all these things. But a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Once you get that in your mind, once you get that knowledge, it cannot be taken away. And that's what God has given us. And I'll say to you as I close, deep in my heart, glory to his name, I do believe. And oftentimes we say that, but we haven't got there yet. You can see that because no Congress in America, in American history, has ever treated a president the way that they're treating our president today. The Republican Party has never, in the Senate, has never filibustered. They have filibustered more since Barack Obama has been the president than they have in the history of America. We need to hold them accountable. But deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. I'll tell you that.